Hello, it's Phillip Taylor speaking from Richmond Green Chambers in London. I'm delighted to be able to introduce and review this work from Ursula Smartt. It's now in a new edition from Ursula, 4th edition, and it's called Media and Entertainment Law. It's very relevant to the 2020s. Ursula is well known to many people for her teaching, lecturing, and this particular book I found extremely useful and contemporary because it covers a lot of things that are happening at the moment within media and entertainment law. It's published by ROUTLEDGE, which is part of the Taylor and Francis group. The book is actually available as both a hardback, a paperback and an ebook. There's an excellent introduction from HELENA Kennedy, more about her in a moment, but we'll have a little bit of a look at the book first. Elizabeth was the lead writer on this book, and she gave it the title, which I agree with entirely, The Definitive Legal Text for Media Professionals, with a foreword by Baroness HELENA Kennedy, Queen's Counsel. Now, we went to the launch of the book, which was excellent, and Helena spoke, as did Ursula, about the book in some detail. And whilst we're not going to repeat much of what was said at the launch, because it was actually videoed as well, the purpose of this review is to explain to you what the book is about and why it's of help. There is the book. It's a paperback version that I'm looking at. There is the spine, which you can see there, and then there's some blurb on the back, including a quote from us of the 3rd edition, amongst others. It's all there. It's a bit difficult to see probably in this light and in the reversed out printing. There is an index at the back, which you can see there. The index is by page numbering. It runs to something like about nearly 700 pages in total. Useful websites right at the back. The book is published in a slightly different structure from some books that you might be used to, but you've got the basic ingredients there. There's a little bit of advertising right at the back from Taylor and Francis. As I say, the index is useful. Then there's quite a detailed bibliography, again at the back. Ursula's done a great deal here. There is, of course, footnoting, which you can see in the body text. If I go to the front of the book, there's the blurb with a few of the previous reviews of the earlier edition. This is an important book for everybody in this day and age. Media and entertainment law, it just states what's actually about the book itself. Nice picture of Ursula there, and there's the actual front page. Then you've got blurb about ROUTLEDGE. Then you've got the contents section. You can see there's a lot of detail there. And then you've running through, there we go, you can see the next page. You've got a total of 10 chapters and a bibliography. The sources, that's the internet sources and websites and so forth. And then the index. Then you've got a foreword from Helena, which is first class. She gave a very straightforward thank you to Ursula for this book. Then Ursula's written the preface itself, which sets out what the purpose of the new book is, and it's dated November 2019. I'm recording this in January 2020 because the launch was just before Christmas. There's some acknowledgements and various other things, thank yous from Ursula, and then you've got quite a useful glossary. Now, I do think it's important to have a glossary with these books because I don't know a lot of the various abbreviations, and I do think it's helpful, especially with the computer world, the internet world, to know exactly what we're talking about. I mean, for instance, we've got, right at the end, we've got, which I know about, wasted costs orders, about what happens, an order that a barrister or solicitor is not to be paid fees that they would normally be paid by the Legal Services Commission because they've done something they shouldn't have done. So you can see there are all sorts of other things that come up there. Without prejudice, for instance, is covered. That's an important area. Then you've got the table of cases, a lot of cases, of course, some well-known ones too. Then you've got the table of legislation itself, because again there's quite a large amount of legislation that's directly relevant. She starts off with UK legislation, then there's actually international treaties and legislation as well, and then after that we get to the chapters and what is useful. Chapter 1, for instance, freedom of expression. You've got a little mini index at the beginning, which is quite helpful, and then we get into the main subject matter. You've got a paragraph numbering on the side there, and you have actually some footnotes. Can I just say that the footnotes are not, sometimes they're a little bit bigger, and there are some blocked out areas to make specific points, but generally speaking it's done without too much pressure, and so the book itself is an easy read, and that's exactly what it should be for students and for practitioners alike. So what do we say? This: for media lawyers, students, and the increasingly wide spectrum of media folk, from journalists to web content developers and so forth, the publication of this new 4th edition of Media and Entertainment Law by Ursula Smartt will surely be a cause for some celebration. Absolutely, here. It was a great launch, Ursula, thank you. And can I just say that this is an important book and interesting, because it affects so many people. We all have to use the internet, basically, with a few exceptions, for almost anything we do today, and that's going to become even bigger in the future. It means you've got to have a few computers. It means you've got to know what you're doing. And frankly, for older people like me, it's difficult, because I don't find it the easiest of facilities to avail myself of, if I can put it that way. And that's one of the reasons why this book is important, because we have to know where we are legally. Because what we say is what Elizabeth comments here: the relentless pace of technological change in the media landscape means that this is a book that's badly needed, and having gone through 4 editions since 2011, it's become a highly regarded work of reference in what is a fast developing and often fraught area of law. And it's very exciting too, because it's in the headlines often as well. So from print to film to broadcasting, none of the traditional media have evolved with such dizzying speed as the internet. Vast as it is, it remains the only medium which is almost totally unregulated. That may change with the Johnson government, because the Prime Minister, is possibly going to introduce various things, but we wait to see. And therefore, obviously, because of that, we have this problem of a lack of regulation. So it's more than a few commentators who've actually compared it, that's the internet, to the Wild West, a new frontier which is completely lawless. And I hope it's not going to remain like that indefinitely, so that we don't have the problems we had with the Wild West continuing. I'm sure things will come about. It's not as simple as that, remember, because you're dealing with a global community. Now, in our review of the 2017 edition, it's only 2 years ago, amazingly, from Ursula's last work, we at Richmond Green Chambers noted her comments on the internet which still apply, namely that it's, quote, ubiquitous, influential, international and almost universally accessible, and one might add, still as difficult to regulate. And it really is a problem. And one of the reasons we don't have regulation of the internet is because it's too difficult. And it means we've got to start talking to people we probably don't want to talk to, and trying to get some agreements. And the sooner we do it, the better. There have been numerous attempts, of course, at regulation, as detailed in the book, including initiatives by the EU to regulate hate speech. That's just to cite one example. There are plenty more. The key question, of course, is, can cyberspace be regulated and governed? Well, largely due to several geopolitical factors, the immediate answer to that would be not yet. Quote, there is yet no universally agreed upon definition of internet governance, says the author. Absolutely right. She goes on to say, especially in areas such as intellectual property, privacy law enforcement, that's a big one, internet free speech and cyber security. Nonetheless, the carefully researched and informed discussion on this and related matters is what distinguishes this book, and the fact that there's a tremendous amount of work and learning that's gone into this to make it as easy as possible for us to understand. And that's the beauty of Ursula's writing style and the way she delivers things and everything else, because overall the focus is on 2 main themes today: freedom of expression and the right of the individual to privacy. We've been here before. It's a regular occurrence with many of the books that I review over the last 2 decades, since 2000, when I first started doing this seriously as a book reviewer. The problem is we do have freedom of expression versus privacy is the issue. Hasn't changed, and at some stage something will have to be done, because it depends very much on who you get as to whether they go on the privacy or the right to freedom of expression route. Either separately or together, each of these issues has become a hot topic of late, and therefore intensively scrutinised in this new edition. Ursula hasn't come up with any answers because there aren't any at the moment, because this is a policy matter, and I have to say that at the end of the day, whilst I recognise rights to privacy, I still believe as a fundamental principle to democracy that freedom of expression overweighs it, it overrides it. Now that's my personal view, and I don't think it's shared by some people, but the fact is that I think you have to have privacy rights, but they have to be looked at in a careful way. Now also new to this edition, and that's only a short list actually that we've got here, are sections on the right to be forgotten. That's a big one at the moment. The media's increasing access to the courts and the regulations pertaining to the press, broadcasting, advertising, film, video, online music distribution services. Also, of course, note another topic that's still there. That's smoking hot, if you like, education and party political broadcast regulations, and the focus on social media and election fraud. Now, I say election fraud here. That's quite important because when we went to the launch, the election was still on, and election fraud is an area where, again, because of the way things are going at the moment, it's not been looked at and modernised, and I think there's an urgent need for modernisation in this area. Notice, of course, too, the 27-page glossary, likely the most useful glossary you're likely to come across, containing thorough yet concise definitions for all the relevant legal terms, including Latin tags and all those pesky acronyms. I mentioned at the beginning of the book that you've got quite a substantial abbreviation section, very useful indeed. Given the ubiquity of the media and its influence in modern life then, this book should, we think, be required reading, certainly for lawyers, researchers and anyone else professionally involved in the media. And I think it's wider than that. I think that this has a general appeal, probably to unrepresented parties in courts, in cases where they may well be defending, so they haven't started it, or they may well be encouraging it, but they haven't actually begun the litigation, but they then find themselves swamped. And I have to say, from our law centre work, that we get a lot of people coming in with very hurt feelings. I want to sue over something or other, and you have to tell them, well, you've got to have a very, very full pocketbook of cash to deal with it. And they must understand the implications, of course, of any litigation. So finally, let me just say that the paperback edition, which was the one we're reviewing, came out as a fourth edition on, I believe, the 6th of November 2019. And as I say, it's also available as an ebook and a hardback. Let's just have one last look at it. It's quite a heavy book for a paperback. There's the front, the side, and then the back. We're just opening it in the middle. You've got here some tables. You can see tables cut, nice lots of colour. Your tables, this is about harm tests and so forth. We're looking here at the Freedom of Information Act itself, a very important piece of legislation. Actually, in this case, is looking at the differences in jurisdictions in Scotland and Northern Ireland, because remember, we're talking about England and Wales, of course, as one specific area, and then you've got others. Reporting legal proceedings, there we go. Now, that's an important one, because as I speak, we are probably at the beginning of seeing some changes taking place about law reporting of proceedings. One of the big ones being some legislation about to be introduced to open up the Crown Courts in terms of televising the sentencing of a criminal. Now, that's been tremendously difficult in England and Wales. It's been in Scotland for some time, 18, 20 years, I think, something like that. Quite a long time. They don't use it all the time, only for the really horrendous cases. You only see the judge. But we are going to be getting into that area quite quickly. More legislation, Brexit probably out of the way in a few weeks' time when we leave formally, and we might start looking at the domestic agenda again. In the meantime, a very great debt of gratitude to Ursula and all the other people involved, and to Helena for the excellent foreword. And I hope all goes well in the future, because I have to say there's probably going to be another edition before too long, so keep at it, Ursula. Thank you. Bye-bye.